We are here. It's time for This Week in Science's live broadcast of our podcast. Woo woo! It's morning for Justin. It's evening on the West Coast for me and Blair. We hope that wherever you are, it is sometime in the day or night.
We
hope
that
you're on
wherever
a
you are,
planet with a
time,
sun.
And just-
time and space exist for you. That is our sincere hope.
It is our hope.
Yeah.
We used to be. We've lowered our expectations. We just would like you to be on a planet in our universe.
Yeah, on a planet far, far away. Welcome. We're going to start this show. Are we ready to go? We got it all good? Yeah. Okay, I think everyone's ready to go then. So let's get this party started in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 859, recorded on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, within the margin of error. Error. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with concussions, disruptions, and curiosity. But first,
Disclaimer. Intelligent life. It was not tried before on this planet, before the human lineage. Not like this, anyway. A life form with such great intelligence and creativity. The tool maker, the builder, the architect and engineer. Able to transform hostile terrains into suburban sprawl. While ever able to change behaviors and adapt to new environments when needed. The language user, able to talk and tell and teach, passing information from one generation to the next. A collaborator, a competitor, a connoisseur, a creature unlike anything the world has seen before. Humans are a grand experiment of sorts. But as far as sustainability goes, it is still being tested. Whenever there has been a human weakness with humans, they have sought to overcome it with technology, with culture, with science. But as things stand now, there's one weakness that has gone unchecked, which threatens all of the progress we have made so far. The almost entire lack of critical thinking among many of its human peoples. Critical thinking, that approach to navigating information is able to tell a good source from a garbage source. Critical thinking, the ability to understand, interrogate information without bias. Critical thinking, that human skill that can develop and replaces attempts to complain our way out of trouble. Instead, thinking our way out. Critical thinking, the only thing you will ever need to bring with you to another episode of This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
this
Blair.
is that.
This
I don't know
right.
what just happened there. It decided to go to the next song really fast. Do your good
Doesn't it-
sciencey thing
I
again.
think it does that most of the time. Doesn't it,
It
do
doesn't.
that most of the time? It does.
I catch
sneaks
it
in
most of the
No.
time.
No. Good. Well, you at the beginning of my good, and then now we got to do it again. So we're never going to get out of the starting blocks in this rate. Here we go. Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're ready for another wonderful show full of science surprises. Woohoo! Curiosities from the world around us, made real by investigation and knowledge. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Tonight on the show, I have stories about, what do I have? I've got some poo pills. I brought my poo pills. I've also got ribosomal disruptions, and I have, oh, yes, one of the other most great stories, bone building bots.
Wow.
Yeah, bone building bots and lots of COVID stuff. But what do you have, Justin?
Sticking with the B alliteration, I've got 40 billion black holes.
Billion.
Antifreeze mice cream, and 2 stories about life on Mars, baby.
2. Oh, wow.
Maybe
Okay.
2.
That is a plethora almost. A virtual plethora? Blair, what is in the
Could be.
animal corner?
I have a story about tiger parts.
Tiger
I
parts.
have also cheating birds. And before we get to the animal corner and the short stories, I have a concussion.
Sorry. What happened? What happened this
really.
week?
I have a story about concussions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's better. All right, everyone. If you have not yet subscribed to us, you can find us all places that podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. We are streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, and Twitch. This Week in Science on Facebook and YouTube. TWIS Science on Twitch, TWISCIENCE. We are also TWIS Science on Instagram and Twitter. And if I'm forgetting anything, you can find all sorts of information at twis.org. All right, let's dive into the science. We're going to start this show off with some tech. I've talked previously on the show about quantum computing. And one of the issues with quantum computing being its failure rate, the number of errors that are just going to pop up. At the quantum level, lots of bits flipping back and forth. There are errors all the time. And if you are going, especially if you're talking about cosmic rays and little tiny things that can be impacted by all sorts of stuff around it, you have to make sure that if you're going to make a computer processor that is quantum based, that it has a very low failure rate, a very high accuracy rate. And so this week, not today, but this week, there are 3 papers that have been published in Nature, and they all report different methods of increasing the accuracy of quantum computing in their 2-bit spin-based processors to over 99.5% accuracy. So they are getting to the point that this is going to lead to the chips for the quantum computers that are yet to come. So there are 2 teams. One team, researchers at QTech, which is a collaboration between Delft University of Technology and TNO, and another team out of Riken, who have been using silicon-based semiconductor spin qubits. They have both gotten well above the 99% barrier for 2-bit qubit gate fidelity. And then a group out of UNSW Sydney, they have a silicon-based quantum processor that uses a different system, 2 phosphorus atoms that have been introduced into the silicon chips. And so it's those phosphorus atoms with electrons spinning around the atoms. So the atom bits are going back and forth, and the electrons can kind of get shared around. And so the electrons that get shared between the 2 phosphoruses can get shared with other phosphoruses. And so it allows like these communication aspects to take place. And it reduces error. And their group out of New South Wales, Sydney, they reported 99.37% accuracy.
Now that sounds like, right, depending on what you're doing, that sounds like a really good error rate.
Right.
You know, if I was, but a phone call, or like just Googling it, a telecommunications error rate that's considered okay is like 10 to the 9th. Okay, so
right, yes.
I mean, maybe it's a big improvement over what they had before, but That means your computer, you're going to turn it on every once in a while. It's just going to say no.
Yeah.
I'm not into that.
I just don't think so. I'm not going to do it.
Because there's so much processing going on all the time, it could actually manifest in a really huge reduction of ability to rely on.
Yes.
Things.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, is the sheer number of calculations happening, meaning that it's gonna
Exactly. It's kind of like it's the law of big numbers. And so if you have the massive numbers of calculations, even if it's a small error rate, it can still be a big error rate. It can still be a problem depending on what you're dealing with. So yeah.
Well,
but
remember what the fatality rate of COVID is and what that's actually turned out to be in human numbers.
yeah, so
Because
to turn
there's
it
a
into
lot of
something that's real
humans.
time right now. Yeah.
Gosh,
the
Blair,
numbers.
take it right to that.
I mean,
right off the beginning of the show.
I think it's a very good reminder for
great
people that
reminder.
have not understood how big numbers work. This is in your face. This is how a very small percentage turns into big numbers when you're working with an originally really big number.
Although
like the
I
number
think
of
there's
humans
something
on the planet.
There's something that I know would happen, which is that that the hardcore computer enthusiast with their like 128-bit resolution screen is going to be like, yeah, but it's quantum.
It's quantum.
Yeah, but your display is all blocks. Yeah, but it's quantum blocks. Okay, fine. Well, whatever.
The big aspect of this really is that before they were getting accuracy rates that were below 99% accuracy, they were getting in the 98% range, which just wasn't enough. And now that they are above, especially with some of the methods out of Riken and Delft universities, they're looking at into the 99.5% accuracy rate, which all of these make it plausible that any of these technologies could be adapted, mass-produced, and used. And especially the Australian group in Sydney, their silicon chips, they aren't semiconductors. Their silicon chips with the phosphorus is something that could be used in the manufacturing technology that we currently have. So it wouldn't be a lot different to upgrade or to change manufacturing. So yeah, so we're getting there. The quantum computing, it is coming. And it's, to have 3 papers come out all at once. These are independent groups reporting that they're getting there. So this is great. Replication is part of science. Justin, what do you have?
Okay.
Okay.
First
Let me
choice.
tell you something.
You all know the song. 40 billion black holes on the wall. 40 billion black holes. Take one down, pass it around. 39 quintillion, 999 quadrillion, 999 trillion, 999 billion, 999 million, 999,999 black holes on the wall. Everybody.
That's going to take a long time.
You got the idea. It's a really big number.
Oh my God.
Speaking of big numbers.
Numbers. But that's how many black holes apparently are out there. 40 quintillion spaghettification zones. A 4 followed by 19 zeros. Or 40 followed by 19 zeros, I guess it would be. And each one of them more massive than the sun. Some just a couple of suns. Some hundreds and hundreds of suns are spread out there, and that's anywhere in the universe. That's not our galaxy doesn't have that many, but all over. So this is a first in a series of papers being published in the Astrophysical Journal. One of the kind of fun things I saw out of this. So researchers determined that about 1% of matter in the universe is already locked up in stellar mass black holes.
Right.
So we've already lost 1% of our universe.
No,
we're not getting back.
That's not it being lost. It's us knowing where it is.
We know right where it is. But
well, isn't that one of the big questions?
Out of
it's
circulation.
Like, we're missing all this matter. Where is it?
Oh, okay. So
it's in the black holes. 1% of it is in the black holes.
But this is technically, this is 1% of the baryonic matter, what we call matter. So it's not that all, because we're like what, 4%? So it's 1% of the 4% of matter in the universe. Then I guess is locked up into these black holes. The 4% that is all the stuff that we interact with that we know that we call matter is such a small portion of what's in the universe.
Oh, I thought you were meaning that like the dark matter.
So, but that's
that we
the
can't see is the dark matter.
So
4% is baryonic, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like.
So they say 1% of the baryonic matter is locked up into black holes already. But it makes me wonder if something can be gravitationally attracted, as we now have learned from I don't know if we talked about it last week, but yeah, we did. The antimatter was responded to gravity just like anything else, so it would end up in black holes. Maybe the dark matter does too. Maybe that's where the missing matter is. Maybe it's already in a black hole. Anyway, I thought that was a fun story. Mostly because I got to sing that song, though. Actually thinking about, and then I started to panic because I'm bad with big numbers. Big numbers are impossible to hold in your brain into a thing that you can actually, you're like, oh gosh, then because there's 70 sextillion stars in the estimated in the universe. So I'm like, whoa, if there's already 40 quintillion black holes, does that mean there's like how many? Which one's the bigger, large, giant number? And it turns out it's not even it's a big number by itself. The difference between the number of stars and the number of black holes, but still, it's a big number.
So does estimating this just gives us a better idea of how everything's distributed? Is this just like, oh, so now we know, okay, stars.
The ratio of stars to black holes.
Yeah.
Well, I just liked it because I got to sing about black holes. But the real, so one of the a little bit deeper than I got into it though is this analysis was based on figuring out how black holes form, where they would form, what different galaxies and gases and things, where the metals are in the universe, where the mass is in the universe. So they've actually also said that they can backtrack this. This isn't just a current map. This is a map that they can play back towards the beginning formation of the universe. So this is over all of time that they're sort of looking at these formations. So
right. So if we know that they're black holes now, then they were stars previously, and this is like how things probably added up.
Yeah, this is how they added up. This is where the metals are in the universe. This is how they coalesce. Yeah, so it's part of a much bigger piece of research. But it does make for a fun song. If you're on a long road trip, start with, don't forget go straight to the black holes and start counting down. Mm-hmm. If nothing else, it teaches the kids about really big numbers.
All right, Blair, do you have big numbers for us? Or
No.
You're going to sing sailor songs?
No.
Okay.
I have a story about when you get a concussion and you're like, I'm all right, coach, put me back in. And
how that's a bad idea?
Are like, we think you have a concussion. Difficult to diagnose, difficult to track, difficult to figure out where you are on your healing journey from a concussion. And so with all that, a group of researchers from Boston Children's Hospital, kind of out of a chance meeting between sports medicine doctors and somebody who worked with urine, decided to look at urine to see if you could find out whether a person has a concussion or not from a urine sample. And so it turns out that there are actually markers in urine that can let you know if a patient has had a concussion or not. Yeah. So they looked at 95 athletes, 48 who sustained concussions and 47 controls. They measured proteins in mass spectroscopy. And of the 71 proteins that differed significantly between the two groups, the two stood out most were IGF-1 and IGF binding protein 5, which were both actually lower post-concussion, significantly lower. And that's because they're directly related with brain injury repair. So the body retains them after a concussion rather than excreting them in urine. So if there's suddenly less of these proteins, that is a good indicator that that individual has gotten a concussion.
So are they then having to compare the sample against a previous sample? Because I mean, if it's like this went down, you'd have to know, or is it like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what it normally is in the blood and it's just not that?
Yeah, so
But
in this kind of first version, they're doing a lot of that baseline versus current. But in theory, you could come up with background levels for a general population and be able to make a much better educated guess than how we currently diagnose concussions by looking at urine, which is a less invasive process than getting stuck in a CAT scan, and can be done very quickly and easily in the field. Even you can just kind of check for a specific thing and say, okay, you're benched.
Yeah, for high schools, it might be a little bit different, but definitely for professional sports, they're probably taking urine samples before the game anyway, so it could be very personalized. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and
that
so
would be great.
Yeah, their next step is they want to expand the kind of the realm of who they're looking at. Still planning on looking at athletes for now, but it sure would have been great after I got in that car accident for me to be able to just pee in a cup instead of go in a CAT scan, and for them to be like, I don't see anything bad, but you have other symptoms, so we're going to assume you have a concussion. Like, okay. It'd be really nice to be able to say, yes, you have a concussion, figured that out really quickly without sticking you in a machine. Go home, lay on the couch.
Yeah. Brain injuries are they're so difficult to diagnose, and their brain tissue. Yes, you can have inflammation. Yes, you can have swelling. You can see some of those things, but they're not always there, and it's not always visible the way that we look. And so that's a great one. I like it. Hopefully, I mean, especially for the high school athletes, maybe we can prevent further damage that will hurt the kids long term.
Yeah. I mean, that would be great to prevent kids from going out and getting a second concussion in succession, kids and adults, because that is often where a lot of trouble starts, is when you get the repeated concussions in kind of a short window.
Oh, you just had a massive crash with your head against somebody else. Maybe we won't put you back in. That sounds like just a good practice.
That's new, because of course it used to be, you got your bell rung. Best way to recover is to get back out there and
get back in there. Toughen up, kiddo.
But this is one of those fields that, as you pointed out, the NFL is going to the money they spend on sports medicine does translate to the rest of society with a lot of innovation that comes specifically from keeping athletes on the field or knowing when to take them off. So, yeah.
Question from the chat room: did it say how long it takes for the markers to show up?
Great question. And since I lost all of my notes from the study, my computer decided to refresh all of my tabs and I lost all of my notes, but I don't see it. So let's see. So athletes who sustained a concussion that were diagnosed by a sports medicine physician provided a repeat urine sample within 7 days, and again 1, 3, 6, and 12 months after the injury. And so
they weren't doing like a really quick sample, but
this isn't on the sideline.
Within 7 days. Yeah.
So this is to see. This is to see if you can play next week. Yeah, that's the 7
In theory, it would be great if everyone got pulled as soon as there was a suspect of head injury, but we do what we can.
Okay, probably in a very tasteless segue. Speaking of put me back in, coach, researchers have been working on poo pills to treat untreatable bowel disease. So people who have bowel infections with Clostridium difficile, which can be devastating to health. It's very difficult to treat. And over the past, 5-10 years, researchers have realized that people with healthy microbiomes in their gut, if you transfer the feces from a healthy person to a diseased person, that feces can make the diseased person's gut better because it repopulates the microbiome of the gut. In order to not just be taking feces from one person to another, what they've been doing is growing bacterial spores that were isolated initially from feces. They have created pills full of these bacterial spores that can be taken with a glass of water as a treatment. And they just completed their their phase 3 clinical trial, and were very successful in their efforts. And so this new pill is called SCR 109, made by Series Therapeutics. The stool from pre-screened donors is treated with ethanol to kill all the viruses, fungi, and vegetative bacteria. And so what gets left behind are spores, nothing that's actually active. And a lot of them are from a phylum that's called Firmicutes. And this group competes with C. difficile in the gut for resources and usually wins. That's what you hope for. And so the Firmicutes can also change the composition of bile acids, which then change the pH of the gut and change the habitability for C. difficile. In this phase 3 trial, they had a higher dose. They included 182 participants that were infected with C. difficile, and they were randomized. They got a placebo or not. And after following a standard course of antibiotics, they were given their treatment. C. difficile infection recurred in 40% of the placebo group, but only 12% of the treatment group.
Interesting.
So, small study still, 182, but this will pave the way for phase 4 trials and open the possibility of this being applied for FDA approval to see whether or not they can treat people with gut disease, with C. difficile infection, with bacterial spore pills.
Yeah. They must be doing something pretty cool because C. difficile, if I'm not mistaken, has a what do you call it? Like a hibernation mode kind of a thing where it's
yeah.
tough little nut to crack, which is why like there's 40% that it resurfaces because it sort of hides, I guess, or goes into a pod mode or whatever. Making up in words. Well, I can't remember.
It's the spore. It's the same as it's the same as what survived the alcohol and the cleaning of the feces, but from healthy guts, it's the good bacteria. And so it's the spores, and it's the C. difficile spores that survive to reinfect the gut. But in this case, because you start giving the pills, the Firmicutes can come in and just go, this is ours.
Yeah, outcompete.
Yeah. So microbiome gut competition. This is kind of like I don't know, the microbiome version of like when you send in a species to compete with another species and biological control.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hope it doesn't end up like the rabbits or other stories that we know
toads.
of.
The toads, yeah.
Cane toads, exactly. What you got next, Justin?
New skin cream is being developed to combat frostbite in mice. Apparently, this is a big mouse problem.
Poor mice out there with their little toes.
People who live, work, or recreate in cold temperatures are at risk of frostbite, a condition that happens when ice crystals form in the skin, and they can cause damage to the muscles, to the bone, to nerves. The main line of defense for somebody who gets frostbite is just warm up really quick. Problem is, a lot of people who get frostbite, the reason they got frostbite is because they're out in a sort of extreme remote location, and which is why they're so exposed to the elements. So that creates the delays, which means the condition can do some permanent damage. That permanent damage can be some awful scarring to amputation of limb. So it's a really, really horrible thing to have frostbite. Okay. This is in ACS Applied Biomaterials. Researchers developed a cream that prevents frostbite injuries in mice when applied to the skin 15 minutes before severe cold exposure. The researchers wanted to test the frostbite prevention properties of a combination of synthetic molecules commonly used in labs to cryopreserve cells. So they're like, hey, this is how we're preserving the cells in our lab when we put them into the deep freeze. Why not use it on humans, but first mice? So it's dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, which keeps crystals from forming inside cells, whereas polyvinyl alcohol prevents ice crystals in the spaces between cells, which can damage membranes. So they developed a formula of this, which yielded a cell survival about 80%, while protecting cell membrane and cytoskeleton. The combination also allows cells to divide and still express proteins more normally after cold stress. So this is not just preventing the initial injury, but also speeding up the recovery from injury. The team then mixed their formula with a commercially available aloe vera cream and applied it to the skin of mice 15 minutes before a cold challenge. The cream reduced frostbite, wound size, tissue damage, and inflammation, sped healing compared with no treatment. The cream did not prevent frostbite when applied 30 minutes or more before the cold challenge, however. So multiple applications of the cream, not a problem. The skin was not damaged by the cream itself in their study. The effects of the antifreeze, of course, in people, how frequently it would need to be reapplied, still has to be determined. So this is a big deal for anyone at risk for frostbite. But is it practical? Because it sounds like you need to anticipate the exposure in advance and then be able to apply the cream in a way that isn't causing the exposure in the first place.
So the first thing I thought of was putting it on my dog's feet.
Oh, very good.
If I was taking her out to the snow.
Yeah, that's a smart idea.
You don't have little dog shoes?
No.
No. Little doggy snow booties.
Not
But it
yet,
could also,
say.
I can imagine it would be useful for people into extreme outdoor exploration. The adventurers who head up to the tops of places like Mount Everest, people who,
because there you are,
Yeah.
lying awake in your tent, thinking about how that second cup of hot cocoa at the end of it, long days of mountaineering, seemed like such a good idea at the time. Only now, with the sun gone down, alpine winds howling at your tent flaps, now as your full bladder makes you twist and squirm in your Arctic sleeping bag, now it occurs to you that your image of braving the elements when you set up this adventure vacation absolutely did not include bearing your essentials to the icy blast of a frigid sub-zero gale. No. So now maybe this product actually doesn't look so bad. Suddenly, the mockery of the Benton mountaineers was worth it as you generously cover your soon-to-be exposed surfaces with 15-minute antifreeze. And you think, who's laughing now? They should think themselves cursed and hold their manhoods cheap upon the peak for fear of frostbite that they did not dare to pee with you upon this night. The next morning, then you get around a campfire with all the old hard climbing, hard cursing mountain guys, and you tell them your tale of terror and bravery and triumph in the night, and then they go, I usually use a bottle for that.
Yeah.
It's nice to know you haven't thought about this at all, Justin.
No, It's like the one scenario I could come up with where you were like, okay, you're warm
15
now.
minutes. I got
You're
15
warm
minutes.
now.
And I'm going to
You
think
can-
ahead.
You can put this on, and then you got to know that you're going to be exposed, and you'll have 15 minutes to be exposed and get back in again. It's the only scenario I could think of. You would really ever use that.
All right. So what's up next? Is it my turn? Blair, did you have another one?
Nope, it's all you.
Where
All
are
right,
we?
so I'm
We
going to
did
move
3
on.
pee poo stories in a row, by the way, and this is not a planned. We don't sit around and talk about like, hey, should we talk about pee and poo? This just happened that way.
We don't plan it ahead of time.
No.
Nope, this just is the magic of TWIS.
Great minds. And then there's us.
And then there's us. Yes. So, every time I see a story that's related to aging, I just think about Blair and how she doesn't want to age. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to report all the things so that Blair can become an ageless head in a jar
Yes.
in the museum in Futurama.
Mhm.
And so researchers have been, delving into our cellular elements to determine what can explain aging. Why do we get misfolded proteins? Why do we get clumps and tangles and things that lead to diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's? And so a group out of Stanford University has published in Nature this week their work looking into the ribosome. They weren't necessarily initially looking at the ribosome. They were doing detectiving to look at the system of protein translation, transcription translation. So you have the copying from the DNA, and then it moves from that copy to the ribosome, and the ribosome is the organelle in the cells that takes everything and starts putting it into the little pieces that are necessary to fold it into the protein. And the what?
Oh no, yeah. If I could use a quick analogy, the ribosome is that giant copier in the office that when it gets jammed, you always have to call the one person who knows. Like, there's only one person who knows how to even get into it to pull the thing. It's way down in there. There's one guy who knows how this got away, but it's the printer for doing that translation stuff. It turns proteins out one side, mRNA and the other side.
Yeah, mRNA, the messenger RNA comes in, and it turns into proteins because of the magic of the ribosome. So the researchers were looking at the ribosome going, okay, what's going on here? And they discovered in their very, very high resolution search, they really got close to those organelles and things moving along in the cells. They looked in yeast, and they also looked in C. elegans, the wonderful little worm that is the staple of laboratories around the world. And they looked at the movement of the ribosomes on the messenger RNA, and they found that older cells have ribosomes that move a little more slowly. And those ribosomes actually stall sometimes and even bump into each other. There's disorganization happening in that translation process. And so when they have decreases in the ribosome performance, that also increased the amount of misfolding that occurred and the number of aggregated misfolded proteins that they saw. And so the researchers say this is a two-pronged situation where aging leads to increased stalling and increased ribosome collisions, but the cell loses the safety net to deal with it, because also in aging, as that ribosome is creating the proteins that would normally be used to clean up the cell, it's messing up the proteins that would be used to clean up the cell. And so the whole system starts to degrade because the machinery that makes the system is degrading. So the researchers went on to do from their yeast experiments and to do some more experiments with the worms, and they found that even if the overall fraction of newly made proteins during with altered translation is low, this little effect, even just 10%, can overwhelm the ability of quality control to work in the cell and start to disrupt processes within the cells themselves. So it is an issue now that it all dominoes. It all is a process, one piece linked to the other. But now we can see that there may be targets that are involved in translation and transcription that we should be looking at. How can we find out? Well, the next questions they're really going to be interested in: why does aging affect ribosomes? And how can we fix it? Because if we can keep the ribosomes spry, then you might be able to reduce the amount of mutations. And so they actually went on and did an experiment in which they reduced mutations that were related to aging in the ribosomes. And of course, the ribosomes continued to work well. So this is a direction that they're going to be working. Fix the ribosomes, fix the cellular safety net, and keep your cells, Blair, healthier longer.
Give me fresh ribosomes. Nom, 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 nom.
Ribosomes. Don't let it avalanche. Don't let it go.
It's something about the new version of Life Finds a Way. It's like, eventually life just gives up.
Sometimes it
No.
does. Sometimes it says, I'm
Eventually
tired.
life
Twitter talk, and I won't allow
stops.
it.
Eventually life stops trying.
Go home. Go home. Okay. This is This Week in Science. Please don't go home yet. We still have much more science to come. And we do appreciate the time that you're spending with us tonight. If you do enjoy the show, please share it with a friend. Okay, let's move on to our COVID update. Beep, beep, doop, dee, doop. Hi.
Ba-da-ba-da.
Ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba.
COVID news with Dr. Kiki. So, any good news this week, Dr. Kiki?
Maybe. Possibly? Yeah. I don't know. It's all kind of meh. Sorry, I can't. Let me just give it to you. Okay, so some researchers looked at original data, did a meta-analysis of a bunch of the clinical trials of the clinical trials, looking at the let me get my things around here. Let's see. Clinical trials for the vaccines that are currently in use. They looked at the placebo-controlled COVID-19 vaccine trials to compare the results of adverse events between the vaccine groups and the placebo control groups to see adverse events, what's going on, because we want to know, like, where are those adverse events really coming from? And in their overall analysis of adverse events, what they found from 12 clinical trials of these vaccines: adverse events reports from 22,578 placebo recipients and 22,802 vaccine recipients. That's a lot of adverse events on both sides of the coin. They compared the numbers, and they said that they found that after the first injection, more than 35% of placebo recipients experienced systemic adverse events: fever, headache, fatigue, all sorts of adverse events. 16% of placebo recipients also reported like pain or swelling at the site of injection, which, of course, that's it can hurt. That hurts.
You
You
got
got an
poked.
injection. Got poked, exactly. The first injection from the vaccine recipients, they had 46% experiencing one of those adverse events, and at least 2/3 of them reported one local event, like the pain and the swelling. They received the vaccine, the pharmacologically active treatment. So what this means is at least some of their adverse events are placebo, because the placebo events are very likely placebo. And so what the researchers are saying is going on here is that this is actually what is called a nocebo effect. It is a harmful or negative placebo result. So a large number of the adverse events that anyone gets, vaccine, pharmacologically active event, having received fever, headache, fatigue, just because you got a shot
I mean,
is possible. This is not, this is just looking at the data,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's the comparison of the numbers between the placebo and the vaccine group that give the researchers this conclusion.
I suspected this. If only because in my anecdotal experience of people around me, a lot of people who are like, ooh, I'm getting my vaccine today. I'm not looking forward to feeling like poo for 2 days and
I'm
blah,
not,
blah, blah.
I know it. Yes.
They inevitably felt terrible.
Oh,
and
so
the people in my life, like myself, who are like, this is gonna be fine. It's fine.
I'm fine.
now wait a sec. You say that, but I hadn't
This is-
even heard about. I had not even heard about there being like a day after a second shot thing that you could like there was no negative effect. I hadn't even heard about it till you told me about it, and I was in bed for like 2 days
Yeah.
after
The
this shot.
power of suggestion.
But now it's all your fault.
That is not saying that there are not real adverse
Yeah,
events.
yes,
This
yes.
is not minimizing that at all, but it is and the placebo and nocebo effects are real. People do feel bad. People do have fatigue and headache.
Fever.
is
Yeah, that's a real
fever.
systemic response, right?
It's a systemic response. This is your body responding to itself, really, because you have primed it to respond in a particular way. But it's the researchers who worked on this, though, they're not putting this information out to try and make anybody feel bad or to nullify or negate anybody's experience of adverse events. They happen, people feel the way they do, yes. But what the researchers say, medicine is based on trust. Our findings lead us to suggest that informing the public about the potential for nocebo responses could help reduce worries about COVID-19 vaccination, which might decrease vaccination hesitancy. And so if we started talking about some of the effects of just being afraid of a shot, or the pills that you take or whatever medication, that there is this effect, that you should just be ready for whatever, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, and this is just the one thing I would love is I would love another double-blind study that's all placebos, but the one that's being told they're getting a vaccine, one that's being told they're getting like a vitamin booster shot or something like that. Because I'm wondering if the thing that if I just look this and I don't put a third of people into the having a placebo effect, is that I would suggest maybe there's a reaction people have to getting a shot that has nothing to do with what's in it, but it could just be a natural reaction to getting any shot.
Yeah.
Because at that point, then you can be prepared for that going into any trial of anything that's injected. But because that seems high, a third, which means the people who do get the shot, if a third have an effect, the other third could be a placebo type of effect. So that's when they came up with, then were like 2/3 of people of the 2/3 of vaccine responses could be falling somewhere in that category.
I'm betting they have data from many, many, many clinical trials of injectables of placebo responses.
Oh,
And
yeah, just any clinical trial has to have that kind of, I mean, if they went bigger, this was just COVID vaccines specifically.
So it would
But
be
if
really
they-
interesting to do kind of a larger study looking at placebo responses across the board in injectables, kind of to Justin's point, right?
Yeah,
Is
To
it
because
see
how
just
what
that your
was
skin
different.
was pierced?
Yeah. Well, and something put in there, and the body
Yeah.
going like, "Oh, we don't know what it is. Gear up." Because
Yeah.
what do we do that with other than vaccines?
Mhm.
And that's typically a vaccine symptom that you're expecting to get, whatever the vaccine is. That's kind of what you expect. Maybe a little bit of fatigue and soreness and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I also think there's something to be said for allowing kind of the idiot light on your own personal dashboard to go off and respond to it. And, we walk through our lives with so many weird random aches and pains, especially, as you get older, you're like, oh, that hurts today. That's great. Moving on with my life. I'm going to forget about it. Right. And then
Yeah.
if you give yourself permission to feel bad, it allows you to focus on that pain and kind of give into it in a way. This is my personal experience.
We're
So,
not going to talk about how I went to bed this afternoon and then got out of bed, took a shower, popped an ibuprofen, had a glass of wine, and now I'm here.
yes. So I think there is something really real to giving yourself an
Permission.
excuse, yes, to feel crummy. And it maybe makes you feel worse than you would have if you were trying to power through your day. But ultimately, if you tell yourself like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to have a terrible headache for 2 days,
Yeah.
there is some
Yeah.
psychosomatic implications there, I think.
And it depends on who you are and what you're doing. I was watching the sports ball game from the last weekend, and one of my favorite players, Debo Samuels, is sitting there on the sideline, looking at the game, and he's been playing, but you can see he's totally skinned his like forearm, and it's like raw and bloody, and it's like he couldn't pay any less attention to it. He's not even that I would have been like, oh, I need a skin graft. Wrap me up, take me to the hospital, put me on all the drugs. Oh, it's so much pain. But he, professional athletes live in a state of dealing with pain as a normal part of life, not affecting them at all.
Yeah,
So
which is why it was part of why I think that on the whole men responded poorly to the vaccine as compared to women. Is
I've heard of that.
Women are used to being
all
in
got
pain
the man flu.
all the time.
All got man flu from it.
Yeah, what feels bad today? What doesn't feel bad today, really? Yeah.
I just wait for the days that I do feel good. That's what I look forward to in life.
Oh, this is strange.
Oh, weird. I get one day this month. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
All right. COVID additionally has to affecting just about everything in daily life. It has affected how sensitive we are to things that we find disgusting.
I love this story. I wanted to bring it and I didn't at the last second. I'm really glad you brought it. It's so good.
So these researchers were testing hypotheses. An old hypothesis about disgust was that basically you are you and you're going to find things disgusting. You're basically going to always have the same level of disgust about particular things. That's just you and how you respond to stuff. And so these researchers at Ohio State University were like, yeah, let's test that out. And so they published their work in the journal Personality and Individual Differences, and they looked at what is known as the calibration hypothesis, which suggests that disgust sensitivity is a more fluid measure that changes with time and circumstance. So they had a bunch of surveys from 2018, so pre-pandemic, to 2020, and then they looked at it. There's about 2,300 participants, and they compared using this pandemic natural experience opportunity to see whether or not people's level of disgust changed. And there were some really interesting results. So the sensitivity scale, this disgust sensitivity scale, has people rate experiences, and they rate them on a scale of 0 to 4, and they will have you rate things like smelling urine while walking in a tunnel under a railroad track, seeing someone put ketchup on vanilla ice cream and eat it, I love that you find that more disgusting than the urine under a
She's a big city. She's from San Francisco. The smell
The
of
big
urine
city
on a
girl.
walk is normal. That's nature. In
Yeah,
San
also
Francisco.
though, zookeeper, come on.
Zookeeper.
Urine.
They
but
had
yeah,
them. They had them rate visual images like rotten meat with maggots in it, to see what was most unappealing, and they found that the average pre-pandemic sensitivity was 2.82, and during the pandemic that increased to 3.26.
Mhm.
And
Really?
so
It got worse.
Yeah.
I would
Yes.
figure with all these people around who can't smell anymore, it would have gotten better.
But what their hypothesis is, what they're concluding from the results is that basically because we are in this disease scenario where our sensitivity is heightened. We're looking for those like, oh my gosh, someone just sneezed in the elevator. Whereas
Mm.
pre-pandemic, someone sneezing in the elevator, it's like, gesundheit. You yell, science, woo! But after, it's suddenly like, oh my god, you just infected me. It's like this very big deal. So instead of it just being related to disease transmission, what these researchers conclude is that it is a general disgust, that just disgust in general is heightened.
So there's a million potential confounding factors here.
Oh, yeah.
One being that everyone was stuck at home for super long. And so they were not exposed to other people's idiosyncrasies in the
I
same
thought about that
level.
too. Yeah.
And so my stuff is my stuff. Other
Mhm.
stuff is other stuff. Yuck, you do that way. Or this doesn't smell like my house. Or, there's just the
Yeah.
comfort zone shrinks when you're in quarantine for months.
Yeah.
So like we were at the beginning of 2020, right? So that's a thing. But also there is a precedence for this in the animal kingdom too, where animals want to distance themselves from individuals that are showing signs of sickness, and that
Mm.
animals that are actually sick distance themselves from the rest of their group or their colony also. So there could be a lot of different things going on here. It could just be our brains being crazy. It could be related to isolation.
And that's why
it could be
everybody's going on.
biology.
Yeah, everyone goes on Nextdoor to complain about people parking in the wrong parking
Yeah.
spot in front of their street and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
so it's interesting. I would like to know, Kevin Reardon in the chat is saying ice cream with ketchup, it's the worst.
Yeah,
No,
who
he
does
wrote
that?
catsup, I will say, also.
Catsup.
Who
Catsup
does that?
or ketchup?
Yeah.
Ketchup. I don't
That's
know
not
who
a
does
thing
it.
anybody's done, is it?
I
No.
never have. Why
No.
would you do that?
I mean, what
But
I
I'm sure
will say,
If you
there are
have, let us
types-
know. Send an email.
There are types of ice cream that are very good that have salty or savory elements to them. But
And?
that is too far.
A step too far.
Yes.
Let's see. Last COVID section study is related to Facebook. Researchers publishing in PLOS ONE found by looking at Facebook data, or I guess Meta. Now, if we got Meta's Facebook platform, I'm so confused.
Meta's metadata.
Meta's metadata tells us that, yes, August 2019 to December 2020, the number of link shares and reshares related to climate change and global warming, guess what? Decreased. We got
Mhm.
distracted by COVID.
Mhm. Of course.
Everything became about COVID
Yeah.
and vaccines and all the stuff. And we were like, what's climate change? That old thing?
Doesn't feel
That's
like such a
not
near
real.
and present danger compared to a global pandemic, even though it is, though.
Yeah, there were a couple of interesting peaks, and they do seem to correspond with the timings of like the COP, the international meetings on climate that bring
So
all of the politicians together.
Is
So
a reason for that meeting. One.
Right, to bring it back into the public sphere of awareness. Yes. Yeah. So not surprising. COVID
Well,
distracted us from some big picture issues. Yes.
the way
With
internet
its own big pictureness.
and specifically Facebook algorithms work, they feed to themselves. They're a feedback loop. So
Right. And
it's
they're
really
within
difficult.
special interest groups too.
Right, and it pushes for things to trend further. It's not like, oh, let's spread the trending out. The algorithms really try to hone in on as few trending topics as possible. So you can see how, by the nature of the beast,
Right.
if the pandemic is happening, algorithms are going to push people to those posts more, that are going to feed into that conversation more, that are going to pull away from the less popular conversations. So
Yeah. Very good insight there. I appreciate that. I hadn't considered the algorithms, and you should always consider the algorithms.
You're not seeing everybody's Facebook. You're seeing your Facebook.
That's right. Your Facebook is not the same as everyone else's. But that's all I had for COVID this week. I didn't want to talk about other things. So, talked about some fun COVID-related things. Yes. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are enjoying the show, please head over to twis.org and click on our subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the show. This is This Week in Science, and we're going to come on back with that time of the show that we know and love as Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
I have tiger parts.
Why?
Or rather, I don't. I
Good.
don't, and no one should.
Oh.
No.
But a lot of people do. It's because tigers are among some of the most trafficked and most endangered animals on the planet. There's less than 5,000 of them left in the wild. This is of all of the kinds of tigers.
What?
There's more than one
Oh,
species of them, but yeah, there's only about 5,000 left in the wild. And previously, studies on tiger trafficking have focused mostly on 13 Asian countries, which are the ones where tigers still exist. They don't really look at the United States or a lot of other Western countries. And so most of these tigers are being traded for their parts for their use in medicine. And so the way kind of Western countries have always thought about this is that's part of ancient Chinese medicine. And so they're using it over there, and the problem is over there, and they need to figure out how to save their animal. You're guessing where I'm getting with this. Data from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request revealed seizures of tiger parts illegally entering the United States from 2003 to 2012. And they actually found 292 seizures in that data set. Now, interestingly enough, in 2019, a study looking at trafficking of tigers looked from 2000 to 2018, so definitely overlapping a lot of this same data set, and documented 624 seizures of illegal tiger products, but estimated that only 6 of those were in the United States. So this new data set that is more thorough seems to very solidly debunk that data set from the previous study. In fact, it looks like almost half, about 46.8% of global seizures of tiger parts were going into the United States.
Oof.
So about half, yeah.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And let's see. So they were looking at these parts. They found that 65.8% of the seized parts had known origin. 99.5% of those known origins came from wild tigers. So these are not farmed tigers. These are not captive tigers. These are tigers being hunted in the wild, being processed into usable parts for medicinal needs.
So
And
this is medicinal needs. This isn't trophy. This isn't somebody who's I
So
shot
here is the thing,
tiger. I want a
Justin.
stuffed tiger in my living room or something.
here is the thing about that. You could see, specifically if you're looking at Asian countries, right? You could see there being some cultural kind of importance to using tigers as medicine. We would hope that cultures could adapt and learn to use other things or to find more value in the animal as it is alive, as has happened with other trafficked animals. However, if half of this stuff is coming to the United States, a lot of it is going to wealthy, oftentimes white individuals who there's some sort of trophy aspect to it. It is part of a novelty or a souvenir or some sort of cultural icon of wealth. And this is something that happens with trafficked animal products all the time. Unfortunately, with rhino horn and tiger, all sorts of parts, and bear bile and all these sorts of things, a lot of the time the blame for the trafficking gets pushed onto people who live in those areas who had traditionally used these things in medicine over many thousands of years. But what this type of research is telling us is that that is not the whole story, and the United States in particular needs to take more responsibility in preventing these trafficked animals from going extinct. So they, yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Yeah.
How then would you redefine somebody like the Joe Exotic Tiger King thing that was on the Netflix, who's in jail for raising tigers and illegally selling them in the United States? Is he one of those long-standing tradition people that we should be protecting because at least the trade isn't coming from wild tigers?
You know the answer to that.
Well, no, but if it's either or.
It's not either or, though. That is a false.
It's neither. Yeah, I know it's a false, but that's
a
the whole
false
point.
argument.
It's a whole part of a false
there also
argument.
is a problem with, as we've discussed previously on the show, with when you exploit captive bred wild animals.
It increases demand, doesn't reduce.
It increases demand, and it also reduces perception of scarcity.
Yeah.
So this is whole thing about giraffes, right? Nobody knows giraffes are terribly endangered because every zoo has them. Right. And it's good that the zoos have them because they're actually maintaining genetic populations that can be released back into the world. But that part of the messaging is essential because there's this disconnect. And just like with Tiger King, lots of people probably watched that show, assumed there were tigers everywhere. Not a big deal. We have tigers here, we have tigers there. Tigers aren't a problem.
There's lots of tigers in Texas, at least.
Texas, Florida, Ohio. There's very specific states that have extremely lax captive wild animal laws. But that whole thing aside, when we look specifically at trafficking, knowing this, there are things that we can do as the United States, taking on it around half of this trafficked animal. Chances are that this isn't the only trafficked animal that we're taking a bunch of in at our ports. But so their suggestion is to take the hotbeds, which are San Francisco, Dallas, and Atlanta, and enhance detection efforts. You can do that with mass spectrometry.
San Francisco, wait, say that again.
San Francisco, Dallas.
San Francisco, absolutely.
Are the hotspots
of trafficked tiger parts.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because for a second I thought it was of keeping captive tigers. I'm like,
no.
How is San Francisco?
There's no room in California. You can't even have a hedgehog.
Very dense city where backyards are at a super high premium, and it's got one of the highest captive tiger populations. Okay, sorry. It's
no. In California, you can't have a hedgehog or a ferret as a pet. So there's very strict laws here.
Yeah.
No. But for trafficked animal parts, San Francisco, Dallas, and Atlanta. You can set up DNA analysis. You can set up mass spectrometry to kind of better vet things coming in through the ports. But also, if you know this much is coming, then customs agents can completely change what they're looking for. Customs agents probably aren't looking for tiger parts coming into San Francisco, Dallas, and Atlanta because the expectation is they're not coming here. But if you know they're coming here in large numbers, then they can completely change what they're screening for. So in this case, knowing where these parts are going can absolutely help stop and persecute kind of the channels through which this stuff is coming in.
I say let's make 2022 the year of the tiger.
Oh, it is already.
Oh, I know.
Oh.
Oh.
Wow, good, Pat, good.
Ooh.
Poof, made it happen.
Did I made it happen? That's right.
Well, speaking of stealing and trafficking tiger parts, we're gonna move on to stealing lovers. This is a study on pied flycatchers. They are native to Europe. They migrate back and forth to northern parts of Africa. And they are mostly monogamous, but they will sometimes
Always the
have sometimes they will have extra relationships on the side. So the prior research on these birds have shown that the monogamy that they normally have helps with their gene pool, and that when there are predators nearby, multiple birds from multiple nests will work together to protect their young. So this is an interesting tactic because wouldn't you want other birds' young to get eaten so that your young would have a better chance at survival and mating in the next season? Well,
I don't want anyone's young to be eaten, but if that is going to happen, then yes.
You'd rather it be someone else's, of course. Yes. So after they observed this, that multiple males would band together to ward off predators, these researchers, as international group of researchers, wondered, why is this happening? Why are they cooperating? There has to be some sort of tactical benefit to doing this. And so they had this kind of sneaking suspicion that they wanted to test out. They set up 44 nest boxes in groups of 3s. Each box became a home for a male and female and their offspring. And then they started studying their mating behavior and placed stuffed predator replicas near the boxes to see their defensive strategies. They found that commonly male birds would mate with other nearby females when their companion was off foraging. Those dirty dogs. But what was really interesting was that the males seemed to know which children were theirs. If a predator arose near nests that did not have any of their offspring, they wouldn't help. But if the threat arose near hatchlings that they had sired, and they did double check this with genetics, they would help fight off the threat as strongly as they did in their home nest. Yeah.
So if Bob down the street comes over and is like, hey, I saw you had a termite problem, so I went ahead and took care of that for you. Also, the fence doesn't squeak anymore. Which put a little stuff in there. Oh, hey, thanks, Bob. That's a really nice. Oh, dang it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the nicer version. It's more like, I saw this really suspicious car pulling up, so I followed it. I chased it out of the neighborhood. I posted about it on Nextdoor. I don't know. I guess that's probably the right one. I called the cops. Anyway, so this is a very interesting case where what looks like teamwork and community is actually just
teamwork and community.
Taking care of themselves. And their own genes.
Taking care of the neighborhood?
Yeah. Yes. Taking care of their own genetics.
Sometimes it takes a village.
That selfish gene, you know?
Well, I mean, we're joking, it takes a village, haha, taking care of the neighborhood. But yes, the selfish gene is at work here, but because of the way that it spreads the genetic material around, it's also beneficial for more individuals. It can be. It's but it can be better for the whole community,
Yeah,
the
no,
population at
certainly.
large. So
And
yeah,
we see other
it works
animals
that way.
practice similar behavior when it comes to siblings or cousins or nephews because there is a shared genetic similarity. So if your cousin succeeds and their progeny succeed, that helps your genes continue, right? So this is definitely
Definitely
it's a
not
more
But is this
royalty or anything from a Shakespearean play.
yeah. This is
So
definitely a
does
more
the-
nefarious version of that.
but does then the male who was the quote unquote monogamous mate originally, does he just ignore the danger? Or do they work together?
They work together.
Because then it becomes a more of a survival trait for the mother to be promiscuous. So a bunch of males think that that's their offspring and all come to help. Because
Right.
it's not
So
just
in this
not just a
case-
gene recognized gene. There's got to be some. Oh, I know that's my side lady in that nest. But if like 5 other birds also are thinking that, they'll all come and help.
So the implications that I read from this study are that the male birds actually know which ones are theirs.
But then the one that's the normal or the mostly monogamous mate of that female should then maybe not care.
Well, so
It's
he's
tricky.
protecting his home nest.
It's
That
his
home nest
Okay, so it's
is
our-
his home, and it is also
Alright.
his prime real estate that he uses to, get the ladies. So he needs to
Okay.
protect that home nest.
Already.
So he already has that reason to take care of his home.
Okay.
The neighbor is coming in knowing
Yeah.
exactly if they are related
Still
to the ladies or not.
It sounds like a little bit more of a good strategy also for the female involvement.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's good for everyone.
Yeah.
Alrighty. This is This Week in Science. Thank you, Blair, for a great animal corner.
You got it.
Yeah. If you out there enjoy the Animal Corner, help us bring the Animal Corner and all of TWIS every single week. Head over to twis.org, click on that Patreon link. You can support this show. Be a producer, an executive producer, behind the scenes, funding the show, the science show of your dreams. Click that Patreon link. Choose the level of your support, $10 and more per month, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. There are also other fun gifts that come along with that as well. Thank you very much for your support. We really cannot do this without you. All right, Justin, we're coming on back with more This Week in Science. What do you have?
I have really, 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 really big news.
What's that?
The type of carbon that is associated with biological life processes here on Earth has been found by a curiosity on Mars. And not just a little bit, a whole lot of it. Analysis of powdered rock samples collected from the surface of Mars by a Curiosity rover are rich in a type of carbon, carbon-12, that on Earth is everywhere that life is. It's the one that life uses. It's, I guess, the lighter, easier to use carbon of the different types of carbon there are. This is quoting Paul Mahaffey, who serves as principal investigator of the sample analysis at the chemistry lab aboard Curiosity. We're finding things on Mars that are tantalizingly interesting, but we would really need more evidence to say we've identified life. So we're looking at what else could have caused the carbon signature we're seeing, if not life. This is they published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, so it's out there. You can go track it down. The biological explanation they have would be ancient bacteria in the surface of Mars would have produced the unique carbon signature as they released methane into the atmosphere. Then ultraviolet light would have converted that gas into the larger, more complex molecules. These molecules would then have rained down to the surface and now would be preserved with that distinct carbon signature in Martian rocks. So there was life on Mars. Aha, we're done. Oh, wait, hang on. What? There's two other hypotheses that offer non-biological explanations. The carbon signature could have resulted from the interaction of ultraviolet light with carbon dioxide gas in the Martian atmosphere, producing new carbon-containing molecules that would have likewise settled to the surface. And another speculates that the carbon could have been left behind from a rare event, even hundreds of millions of years ago, when the solar system passed through a giant molecular cloud rich in the type of carbon detected. Christopher House, a curiosity scientist at Pennsylvania State University who led the carbon study, says all three explanations fit the data. Oh, that's never good. That's right.
So that really narrows it down.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more data to rule things
basically
in or out, because all three fit. So living creatures on Earth use that carbon-12 to metabolize food for photosynthesis versus the heavier carbon-13s. So significantly more carbon-12 than carbon-13 in the ancient rocks, along with some other evidence, suggests they are looking at life-related chemistry. But they are biased because they are Earth scientists looking at this. And that's our one really big example of a planet that we've studied. And this is where the carbon-12 is. And according to Andrew Steele, curiosity scientist who's at Carnegie Institution, there's a huge chunk of the carbon cycle on Earth that involves life. And because of life, there's a chunk of the carbon cycle on Earth we can't understand, because everywhere we look, there's life.
Modifying it, carbon, right? It's always
life,
involved.
So it's hard to tell which one is which, what's going on.
So Mars is either going to be an example of a planet that used to have life, and so maybe it has that signature still, and we can start to figure out how those cycles work, because there's still something of a carbon cycle. It's not the same as it is here on Earth, though, with Mars.
So it's saying curiosity researchers found that nearly half of their samples had surprisingly large amounts of carbon-12 compared to what they have measured in the Martian atmosphere and in meteorites. So these were all five of these samples are in Gale Crater,
which is where water has been. We think, we're pretty sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So great place to go check.
Yeah.
And you pick the right place, and you're finding the thing that you think you might have if there was an ancient sort of lake there and life was. Again, House saying on Earth, processes that would have produced the carbon signal we're detecting on Mars are biological. We have to understand whether the same explanation works for Mars or if there are other explanations, because Mars is very different.
It is very different.
Other Martian life news. You thought that was it. You thought, oh, that was the tantalizing Martian life news. There's another one. Organic molecules. Organic. That means life, right? Organic molecules.
Still carbon.
Right, that hurtled to Earth from Mars. This is one that was discovered in Antarctica in 1984. The Allen Hills meteorite. We knew, okay, gosh, this has organic molecules in it. And it turns out this is from Steele again, who was also part of the last story. They are not from life, but were synthesized during interactions between water and rocks that occurred on the red planet about 4 billion years ago. So this is Andrew Steele at Carnegie again, who's publishing in Science this time. But it's telling you two great things. One, Mars 4 billion years ago had water-rock interactions taking place. That's huge. But these particular organic molecules, not so much from a life thing. Yeah,
just a bunch of C's.
They're commonly associated with life, although they can be created by non-biological processes as well. That's things like carbon and hydrogen, sometimes oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, some other elements. They found the evidence of water rock interactions similar, it says, to those on Earth. And Steele goes on a little bit. These kind of non-biological geological reactions are responsible for a pool of organic compounds from which life could have evolved. and represent a background signal that must be taken into consideration when searching for evidence of past life on Mars. Furthermore, if these reactions were happening on Mars, it must have happened on ancient Earth as well. And even Enceladus. It may explain some results we got from Saturn's moon Enceladus. So not it. The meteorite itself doesn't look like it has life signal upon it, but it has the signature for the precursor. And now that we know that's 4 billion years old, that's right around when this planet was getting cooking too.
So basically, we didn't need to ever go to Mars. We just should have looked more closely at this meteorite.
Not so much a smoking gun, more like a ice cold holster with no gun in it.
Exactly. What did that used to hold? Tantalizing clues, perhaps? Oh my, Mars is so full of fun. I just can't even with it. What do we have next? Well, I'll tell you what we have.
Bone building bots.
Yeah, I have bone building bots. The alliteration is just so much fun. Bone building bots. Why would you ever want bone building bots? Well, maybe you would want bone building bots and I love saying it, and I might say it a little bit too many times. I apologize, but I don't really apologize. So it's my hashtag sorry, not sorry right now. Bone building bots could be used to grow very strong, solid structures wherever we need them. Very small to larger size, depending on the need. They could also potentially be used to actually strengthen broken bones, to help heal bones that have cracked or been broken. So
what about if you have osteoporosis? You just have kind of weak, brittle bones. Just kind of give them a tune-up.
Right? Could we? I don't know if it would work exactly in the same way. You'd probably more like to, add a little bit more calcium and vitamin D to your diet at an earlier stage. Maybe make those microbes in your gut happy to start putting all the proper nutrients into your bones earlier. But, our bones, they are organs of their own, They're very complicated. This, however, is a very simple process. It's inspired by our bones and the fact that our bones can grow from when we're babies and they are relatively soft and cartilaginous into stronger, harder bones. And researchers in Sweden and Japan were inspired by the fontanelle in babies' brain, in babies' heads. And Justin, you're about to have your partner is about to have a baby. You know that fontanelle? You want to describe that fontanelle?
It's the cone-headed babies. So you get a baby, and then they look like a cone head from Sun Alive.
That's not. Yeah, they can look like a cone head, but why do they look like a cone head?
It's because they have a soft section of their skull.
Yes, and
you can pump their brain.
There are multiple smaller bones that make up the skull, and at the top of the skull there's a hole, the fontanelle, and that is covered by soft connective tissue that then bone grows into and brings all those bones together, hopefully into a solid skull above the brain. And this is, some parents will try and fix their baby's cone-headedness with head braces and other things. Just, I don't know. Just don't leave your baby on their head for too long at one time.
There's all sorts of things parents will panic about because it wasn't any
so much parental
with
panic.
Any children yet, but you can see the ridge line of the bones will be very prominent sometimes in newborns. These are things that go away within the first month of being on the planet. But if you're a new parent, I guess if you had never didn't know anything better and nobody told you, you might think it was look like a birth defect. Like that's not a human head. That's not how it's supposed to be shaped. But these things will fix themselves.
Do you think a nice round head is going to come out of a very small opening? Oh no, there's some squeezing and cone making that takes place. Nice round heads come of C-sections. So let's talk a little bit more about this process. The researchers were intrigued by the idea of creating materials that would have different properties at different points in time, going from soft and flexible and then to hard. And so they liked this idea of a micro robot, something that could be injected into the body through a syringe, and then they would unfold and develop their own rigidness, their own rigid bones. So these researchers published their work in Advanced Materials, and their microbot is one that they use an agar gel or an alginate gel, and on the gel, a polymer gets grown, and then that polymer is electroactive. And so when they apply low voltage to the polymer, it changes its volume. And so the micro robot then moves in a specific direction. Now, again, the definition of robot here is very flexible. This is really, is it a robot? It's just something that's doing a specific function. So this is the debate that we could have it or not have it. I don't know. Anyway, these micro robots, they're very, I don't want to talk about that. I want to put that picture up there. I'm putting all sorts of different pictures over there. They apply the stiffness, and if they've determined that if they pattern the gel with either horizontal lines or diagonal lines, they can actually get the gel to curve in different directions. So if it's patterned with horizontal lines, then it forms like a rainbow arch. Or if it has a diagonal line, then they apply the electricity and it curves like a corkscrew. And so the material, they showed that they could create these hardened bone materials, and that they would, on the other side of the polymer, on the other side of the gel, they would apply biomolecules that would then grow and harden. And they applied this to chicken bones, and they saw that those biomolecules actually incorporated with the chicken bones. And then when they removed the electrical application, the polymer came away from the bone, leaving the biomaterial behind, attached to the bone. So this is just an interesting proof of concept. It's not actually something that is going to be used the next time you go into the doctor with a broken bone at this point in time, but it could lead to, these developments of materials that might be really useful for, who knows, battlefield injuries, or for, cracked bones. If you do have osteoporosis and your bone is cracked, you could get it strengthened.
Yeah, give it like some braces, kind of give it
yes,
like a splint almost made out of this kind of stuff to kind of give it struts and give it more. We know when I'm 200 years old, no matter how much milk I drink now, my bones are going to start turning to powder. So, I gotta figure out a way.
I'm like imagining like a corkscrew wrap, like a ribbon that goes around my bone and just wraps itself around my bone to keep it strong.
I love that.
Interesting. A little bit of reinforcement there. Well, if there's anything to it, and if it is going to become a treatment, you know where we're going to see it first? Our sports ball people.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, or in Wolverine, because they'll figure out how to use this technology on adamantium, and then that'll be the perfect way to coat his skeleton. He'll be all set. Whoosh.
Because the Marvel universe is the real world? Oh, wait, that's not Marvel. It's the other one.
Well,
no,
so
it is
Marvel.
Wait, but it's not. I know.
They're not in the
okay.
MCU yet.
It's not the MCU. Okay. Yes.
What are you talking about?
We will discuss this after
I'm
the
talking
show.
about Xavier's men, okay?
I need to get more pop culture references. I need like a guide post.
Oh, I made a faux pas the other day talking to my 10-year-old son. He said something about the MCU, and I was like, "Oh yeah, the Marvel Comics universe." And he goes, "Mom, canon."
Actually, it's Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that's
Oh my
fine.
goodness. All right. I want to hear about all these things after the show. We have now finished the show. I hope your bones are strong and your heart is light and you are sprightly and your ribosomes don't bump into each other. I hope that your pills are filled with never mind. I'll just stop right now. I hope that your levels of disgust decrease over the next several months. And then I hope you enjoyed this show. That was fun. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have come now to the end of the show, and it is time for us to give shout-outs. Shout-outs to Fada. Thank you for your help with social media and show notes, Gord and Aaron Lore. Thank you for manning the chat rooms, keeping everything happy and light. And Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you for editing and for all of your assistance. I would additionally, as always, love to thank our Patreon sponsors for their support. Thank you to, who am I thinking? Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazar, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tazi, Woody MS, Andre Bassett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, aka Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Maddie Perrin, Gaurav Sharma, Don Mundus, Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredas 104, Sky Luke, Paul Aronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Sean and Neil Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Rami Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Hey Arizona, Support Aaron Lieberman for Governor, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Mallory Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Mountain Sloth, Jim DePoe, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Steve Neighbor, Eric Nappy, O. Kevin Perchan, Aaron Luthen, Stephen Bell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Silverly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, head over to twis.org and click on that Patreon link on next week's show.
We will be back broadcasting 8 p.m. Pacific time or 5 a.m. Thursday, something Central European time from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as twis.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe while you pipette some things? You know, just various things in various amounts. Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, you can get your friends to subscribe as well.
Yeah, for more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, where you can sign up for a newsletter, or maybe you could even write the newsletter. Why not? Just submit something for the newsletter, because then we would have something in the newsletter that we could then have people sign up for.
Hey, do you wanna write our newsletter for us? Contact Kiki. It might work out. You can also buy a 2022 calendar still on our website. We have a few left. So click on that frog. Please sell out so that I can continue to make calendars every year. And, we make our money back. Anyway, you can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, not come, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into one of 40 quintillion black holes in the largest shell game ever played, and we will never be able to find which one it's in.
Oh my goodness.
Law of not large numbers.
If you like, you can tweet at us on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes during the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations.
Woo, 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 woo. It's This Week in Science. We're done. We're done.
Done.
Done. Well
Done it.
done.
We're done.
Well done. I think Justin ran away. Like, he's not, his computer's not on there. He's there, but he turned his camera off and everything off completely instead of just kind of removing himself.
Does he know how to do that?
Maybe not. I don't know. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. I hope you enjoyed it. We had a couple of fun bloopers in there. If only. I mean, could you imagine? That would be a lot of work, but that would be like the project of a lifetime to go through all of our TWISes and find the funniest bloopers. TWIS bloopers through the years.
Be pretty great.
It'd be great, Blair. It'd be really great.
That'd be really great.
It'd be really great. All right, Laura, I know you're no sellout, but we would like to sell out of calendars,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I feel like people didn't buy calendars this year because time doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anymore. No, we have sold almost all of them. I think there are maybe 15 left.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Good.
it's not too bad. Not
Good,
too
good,
bad.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. As long as we get close, then I can keep making them.
Yeah. Eric, I'm glad you like your calendar. Yay. Oh, our in-law gave up on trying to find your stuff, Blair. Because it was too much. It was just too much. There's just too much awesome in there. Oh, Gord. Did you see Gord's comment?
But you've got the wrong year available. It's so much. Yes. Fair.
Gaurav, don't feel guilty about feeling optimistic about Omicron. Yeah, I don't feel that you should feel guilt about that at all.
Well, I mean, all the
If you're
models.
vaccinated and you're still you're going out, but if you're making choices appropriate for yourself and the people that you would generally be interacting with, I mean,
Yeah,
it's fine.
So the models based on what the kind of the flare up that happened in South Africa, there's an expectation that it'll last a few more weeks.
Yep.
The issue
should be
is
peaking in Oregon about this week, but
Right.
they say it's gonna run its course hopefully like in the next 4 weeks or something like that?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Well, and
6?
then there's also the added piece that Omicron popped in right when everyone was getting tested after having traveled for the holidays. So it's the combination of the fact that a bunch of asymptomatic individuals got tested, which is great. It's really great. But if it wasn't for Omicron, a lot more of those asymptomatic individuals would not have been infected. And
Right.
so it's kind of this perfect storm of a bunch of asymptomatic individuals getting tested and having traveled during
Yeah.
the variant, but
Yeah.
also getting tested. And then on top of that, it being this variant that can break through the vaccine. So all those things together, that means that the numbers are bonkers. But yeah, if you're testing yourself, if you don't feel well, if you're staying away from people that you know have suspected exposure or symptoms,
Yeah.
and you're staying away from people who are susceptible, then
Yeah. If you still feel like, you can go out, especially if you're younger, and everyone has their own risk assessment that they need to do. But you're vaccinated. I
Mhm.
imagine you're wearing masks some places.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm in the office, so I'm double masking in the office and
Yeah.
trying to get my hands on a good amount of N95s. But there's also this issue where they say you can reuse the N95s over and over, but that isn't with an expectation that you're wearing it for 9 hours straight, like I am. So,
Well, yeah, the recommendation is I think changing it out every 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
people aren't
so
doing that.
no, and
No.
for me, that's not. It's not possible for me to do that. So,
Do you have an instant pot?
mm-mm, no. But
What
I
does-
thought
There
also
are ways
doing that.
to sanitize them.
I thought sanitizing N95s, they're still effective, but as you sanitize them, their effectiveness
Over time
approaches
decreases.
surgical masks anyway. So if I'm going to be
Mhm.
reusing an N95, but I can get a fresh surgical mask every day, there is a part of me that thinks if I'm going to double mask and I'm going to put my surgical mask and my cloth mask over it, that might actually be better than
Mhm.
reusing an N95 over and over and over.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think I've told this story before. I was doing
Better to
that.
have an
I was-
N95 every day.
of course,
I had the
of course,
I
and
had
that would
the-
be. I'd also love to, eat a chocolate cake every day and not gain any weight. So
I got stopped in the airport. This is earlier on in the pandemic, but I got stopped in the airport because I had my the cloth gaiter thing over my face. Now, and you have to wear the proper mask to the airports, even when there weren't any sort of mask mandates, even when they weren't really recommending, like, oh, it's just for the healthcare profession. You still needed one to be on an airplane to fly internationally, if that tells you anything. But I had to lower it to show I'm wearing a mask under this.
right,
Also, I'm not taking.
you're doubling up.
Yeah, I was doubling up. Like, this isn't effective by itself, but with this on top of the thing there, but yeah, double masking thing. And I is it annoying to hear me talk about taking 6 weeks off? Is it at this point, is it annoying? Because now people are talking about giving up.
Oh yeah,
That's where everybody is.
Everybody
everyone's
is
gonna
like,
get it.
let's just
Let's
all
just get
have
sick.
more death.
Yeah,
Instead of, it's 6 weeks. Like, how short? Like, I am somebody who I consider to have a short attention span. Like,
Justin,
I'm
I
even
know.
bored with me saying this now and would like to talk about something else because that's how short my attention span is. And yet I am like completely okay with the idea of let's just take 6 weeks off. And the problem is, who this affects more than anything? It's just, to me, it's got to be like business and banking and Wall Street care more about profit.
Always.
Just, because everything else.
But it's that, Justin, it's something else though also.
Is
It is the sunk cost fallacy. I am convinced
Oh,
it
that's
is
an
the sunk
interesting
cost fallacy.
perspective.
Because
Yeah.
if we do that now, then the last 2 years were a waste.
They were.
I
So
know.
here's the thing.
But no
Here's
one
the
wants
thing.
to. No one wants to admit that.
Right.
And this is
but-
a huge
but-
emotional response
Yes.
to not want to have made it proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that the last 2 years were a waste.
But that means that the sunk cost analysis thingy is always going to affect every decision forever, because we could have had that same sunk cost thing after the first lockdown shutdown.
I
Didn't
think
work. But that was like by 6 months we would have like, oh, we already tried. We give up.
Yes.
We would have saved multiple millions of lives
Yeah.
if we had said, okay, that was didn't work,
And
but
it
we're
would have
going to
saved
try
money.
again.
Yes.
And money,
And it would have saved money.
and
But this is the problem.
everybody.
So people don't want to go backwards. They don't want to shut down further, having opened things up because of what was lost in whatever level of shutdown that existed before. So there's that sunk cost, right? So you don't want to move backwards when you know you're going to lose more. But
Yeah.
it's also this weird mental thing where we've come this far.
Yeah, but
Why would we go backwards now?
I think partly it's Paul Disney says, "Oh, there's way more than 6 weeks of content to watch on the internet." But that's the problem, is that's the real sunk cost. People are like, I already watched everything I wanted to watch.
I know, we're done. I've run out of good
I don't
shows. The
nothing else to
Expanse
watch.
is over. What am I gonna do? I have to just watch
Okay.
it over again?
Okay, so here's my giving a little to get a little. We shut down everything but Hollywood. Okay, Netflix can still, the only people who are allowed to be out in the world are those shooting shows, and they can use all the great locations now because there's going to be nobody to interrupt. There's no, they can have all the monuments and the big locations, and they can just pretend whatever they want because there's going to be no people around getting in the way of the shot. Just Hollywood can run, everybody else 6 weeks.
So here's another thing you could do. Remember that government stipend, the not stipend, what was it? The stimulus that we got at the beginning of the pandemic?
No.
You know what costs around $600? Actually, quite a bit less. A gaming system. Some of them cost $600, right? But so just send everybody a Nintendo Switch, right? Just send everybody a Switch and a couple video games and be like, here you go. There's your 3 weeks. Enjoy.
So that's a really interesting point, because there's some, I think it's a TED Talk or something that was talking about gaming and the origins of gaming. And I think they told some story about this group that like this areas, maybe it was in Greece or something, where they were like, we can't afford to feed everybody because the harvest wasn't good enough. So they rolled dice, and a big part of the population just left. They played games, and those that won or lost or whatever it was just left. So there was enough food stores for everybody else. And those people that left are thought to have settled in Rome. And that was like, maybe the early start of the anyway, I don't know how much truth there is to any of that. But yeah, just give everybody a console, have them game for 6 weeks. A lot of them might not come back because that stuff's pretty darned addicting, I hear. Yeah. But it's not too late. We can still, and we might solve all sorts of other problems at the same time we're preventing this spread.
One of the really great organizations at estimating disease and populations is the IHME up at the University of Washington in Seattle. And for the United States, they are predicting their prediction, if this is basically assuming there's no other variant. This is just with the variants that are out right now. Their current prediction scenario is that like we're almost to the top of the curve, and that by the beginning of March, we will have peaked at pretty much all the cases, the deaths, with only slight increases above that from beyond March. So daily deaths are pretty much on their way down at this point. So fingers crossed, no more variants. I think Fauci said similarly, he's very optimistic with Omicron because of the exposure of everybody and the possibility that if that's it and everybody kind of gets coverage and then we have like a yearly booster with the flu shot, like this could be this could be really great moving forward.
Yeah, as
We
long as
haven't
nobody
quite
can get
peaked out
reinfected.
on, yeah. And we
But
haven't
that
quite
happens.
peaked out on hospital resource use, which is still,
But that's such
we're
a
still
bad
going through it.
metric. That's the,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the metric that has frustrated me. The state of California did this. They're like, well, if we get up to this level of ICU, then we're going to shut down again. You could just shut down now and prevent that.
Just prevent it
Like,
from happening.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
It's just ridiculous how the medical system has been used and abused. It's just insane that exactly that. Like, oh well, there's still room. It's like,
And I think
what?
one of the biggest variables is mask use, and this shows that beginning in December 20 going into February 21, there was almost 80% mask use. They were looking for 95% mask use. But then in the summer, it's summertime, Delta was going away, mask
Hot
use
out.
like bottomed out, and we haven't come back from it. And we're still, even now with Omicron, not even to 50% mask use. I mean, that's across the
Really?
country, and it would probably depend on, by state, but it's just, this
Is this
one of the
self-reported?
things. Probably, yeah. So this is,
who say they always wear a mask in public.
yeah. So this is self-reported, but still.
Always wear a mask in public. That's a tough one because
I don't
that
wear it if
includes-
I'm on a walk.
Yeah, I don't wear it
outside.
outside.
Yeah.
Unless I'm in a crowded area. So
But this
would
is
I
one of the
answer no
biggest
to this?
things, though. I don't know. This is one of the biggest things that can reduce transmission, though.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Huh. Yeah, social distancing is not
Social distancing is not happening.
doesn't exist anymore.
And it's going to become less and less and less as Omicron becomes less of an issue.
I
and
did love me some
all that.
social distancing. I gotta tell you, it was so
too.
nice.
I might like to go to a restaurant every once in a while again. I don't really do that. I, eat outside sometimes, but it would be nice to go to a restaurant, eat inside, have a fancy night, go to a movie theater. I haven't done that, 2 years. So that could be fun. Not to have those considerations in the future. I know we're all thinking about that kind of stuff,
Go
but
to a museum,
Yeah, that's the big thing that I'm missing is
yeah.
being able to go to those cultural events, going to the science talks and the museums and all those sorts of things. I miss all that.
Quite a few science museums are requiring vaccination for their guests, which is pretty cool.
So I did take my kids out, my girls out to the Cal Academy of Sciences late last year. We had to show vaccination proof, and we're wearing masks the whole time in there. And it's a kind of an open building environment. It's not, and it wasn't too crowded, but it was still it was probably a really bad idea.
Was the rainforest dome open?
Yes.
See, that's interesting to me
I
because
thought
it's
that
so
was
hot
weird,
and
too.
humid in there.
And
but-
it's a contained sort of environment. Yeah.
Interesting.
But you're right. It's very open air. Otherwise, besides the rainforest dome, and yeah, if everyone you're around is vaccinated, there's at least at that time before Omicron hit, that was a pretty safe thing to do. It was really rare to have breakthrough infections at that point that were high enough viral loads to get you sick.
Yeah, but
it's a whole nother ballpark now.
So, and it's interesting. This is an interesting question. Gaurav's asking about why Omicron is replacing Delta and why can't they both exist? And they both can exist, but what ends up happening is they are competing, that the virus gets in, and even if you get infected at the same time by Delta and Omicron, what's going to happen is that because Omicron is just better at getting into cells, even within the body, it is going to get into the cells faster and do what it does faster than Delta will. And so the immune response and everything that Omicron will really get going is going to get rid of Delta, and it all works out in the wash. And so what they're also saying is that Omicron looks as though, and this is the interesting thing, that Omicron infection looks as though it blocks Delta infection, that because there are antibodies in common, if you've gotten Omicron, you're less likely to get Delta. It's like getting vaccinated almost. But Delta is not necessarily the same like, amount of protection against Omicron. So if you've had Delta, you can still get infected with Omicron.
So that makes sense from a few standpoints. So I know Omicron, so original OG COVID could take up to 2 weeks to pop up, right?
Yeah.
And Omicron takes like 3 days. So so they're definitely beating the other variants to the punch, the Omicron. But I keep thinking back to kind of that whole idea about like a good and a bad parasite, and how a good parasite doesn't kill its host. And so Omicron is really good at growing and populating and spreading and not killing you if you're vaccinated, right? Which is the whole thing.
Eric Knapp has a hilarious joke, though. I do not want another variant, but the next Greek letter after Omicron is pi, and we know pi goes on forever.
No thanks.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my God. I keep thinking I know what's coming next, and then nope.
You don't.
Yeah.
None of us,
I don't, because there's also the human element, which is the part that's
exactly why.
so wild. Is that they're, I know people who got their positive test and are being diligent at home and tested again after 5 days, and it's still positive, and so they're staying at home and they're not going anywhere, and they're, being extremely careful. But that for every one of those people, how many people are not testing at all, walking around positive, getting a positive test, and then waiting a few days, feeling better, and just going about their lives without testing again to check that they're not shedding anymore. It requires so much diligence, but also like resources. You have to be able to, thankfully we're all going to get home tests soon, but that's only 4. So if you use them all, then what, right? But before that, when people were price gouging the home tests and they were difficult to get and they weren't always accepted, if you had to get an appointment to go somewhere, then you had to get the appointment, you had to get transportation to your test, you had to take time off of work to get your test, you had to get somebody to watch your kids to get your test, then you had to sit around, wait for the test results, and then based on the test results do XYZ, right? So I think, there's people being more conscientious, but there's also a severe imbalance to who can respond appropriately to a COVID infection.
6 weeks, 2 years ago, we'd be worrying about none of this. 6 weeks now, and we won't be talking about this a year from now. Just do it. Just do it. Which is not doing anything.
Yeah. Leave that grocery checkout line that hasn't gotten you anywhere, that you've been standing in for an hour. Hop to the new one where you have to start over. It's faster.
It is. It is. They just opened that lane. And
how many times each of us have done that? So many times.
I'm already here. I've waited this long. There's people behind me. No.
So Gaurav said earlier, Don't Look Up was not good. I took the recommendation from TWIS. Y'all let me down.
That was a fantastic movie.
I really liked it. It was
just
depressing.
That's my favorite
I got
movie right now.
about an hour into it, and then I had to stop. I still have an hour left in the movie.
Wow.
I was tweeting my responses. I'm very upset with this film because it's painful, because it's too much. It's too real. Yes, the satire is there. It's supposed to be biting satire, but because life is parody at this point in time, I don't. I just.
So
It's just too
apparently it
much.
wasn't as
Yeah.
extreme originally,
I know,
and
they
he had
even
to
make
turn it up because the pandemic happened and everyone was like, "Uh-oh, this is what we wrote. This is actually just happening. Right? We have to make this more absurd."
Yeah. That's
The absurd stuff
where
is pretty funny, but there's some stuff that I would love to I have to go dig up interviews with the director at this point because or the writer because there's like the ongoing joke
yeah.
about the Pentagon general.
charging for the
It's like,
free water.
what? I just
Yeah.
and she's like through the whole thing, she's like, I just
get
don't
over it.
understand.
Cannot get over it.
But that's perfect because
I love
again,
it so much.
like it's down to
I just
humans,
don't get it.
right? It's all the
Yeah.
Why
humans are the
would
problem
he-
and the solution.
He's a general.
He's a general.
Doesn't
Why
need
does-
the money.
He doesn't need the money. Why would he do that? But it is that I really do like the way that the scientists are humanized. That these are people with, failings and they've found something and they're, excited about it, but also like scared. And how do they talk about it? And oh my God, I'm freaking out because nobody's listening. And suddenly, you're a meme instead of being a message. And like, there's so many things that just are hitting so close to home.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't it like, I'm trying to remember the name of the politician like a while back. He was like a popular
Dean.
Dean. Yes.
Yeah.
Howard Dean.
Howard Dean. Yeah, I
And
was
the
thinking about that too.
like that, the excited yell. And I was
He
like,
he got all Ric Flair at the end of
he got
campaign
excited and that's
speech.
awesome. But it was like at that point it
I'm
went,
still sad about it.
I know.
I
Me
thought
too.
he
I was
was-
like, I liked
I
him.
thought he was a great choice.
There were probably reasons he wasn't, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah, but that was
It just-
also back in the day when you're like, oh, they wore the wrong color suit this late in the year or whatever. And now this is
you
why
mean
we've had
like still?
this is why we had to ramp up the ridiculousness of our entertainment because reality became much more ridiculous.
I mean, the day that 5 years ago, I showed the film Idiocracy to some friends of mine who had never seen it before. And when I had seen it, probably 5 years before that, I was like, oh my God, it's the funniest movie. Ha ha ha. And then we watched it and it wasn't funny anymore. And when Idiocracy isn't funny, there's something wrong with reality. But how do we fix it, folks? That's the
6
big
weeks.
question here.
6 weeks.
How do we
6
fix it?
weeks.
Yeah.
So one of the things, like if we're talking about not the pandemic, but just people in general, I really think like every once in a while I talk about sympathy for all the people who don't haven't been educated or inspired to be educated or getting fed bad information is the only thing that they can digest, and so of course they're reaching out in the world and making obscene observations based on only being fed biased information or what have you. It's just critical thinking training.
Yeah.
It needs to stop being a college level thing that's taught.
Did you read that article? There's an article that like just out like today, I think, basically that we should teach philosophy of science in high school.
Yeah, no, it really should be. It should be a core thing that I would go earlier than high school because you got to think when do you really need this?
Critical thinking and curiosity, inquiry. Yeah,
I think the critical thinking. If I had been better exposed to it before being a teenager, might have made better choices. Probably
maybe,
not.
I mean,
Probably not.
teenagers are still
Probably not. Yeah,
teenagers.
probably not. But I might have. Right? But because the ability to just assess good information from bad information, or to have a follow-up question of your own to information that you're being fed, seems to be what's lacking, because there's so much parroting of information that takes place without critical thinking ever seeming to come into play. It may be like the hard fact on this might be the thing I don't want to admit, which is that a decent proportion of humans are incapable of critical thinking. And that's why XYZ, all the horrible things throughout history and all the trends that we see today and all this.
I don't
it's
believe
just
that.
people aren't. Yeah, I don't want
I
to.
think
Maybe
people
that's what
are
it is.
capable. They're just either they haven't learned how, or they're lazy.
Yeah, I think elementary school. I think we definitely should. So there's a great. What's the experiment where? Okay, where you so the goal is there's it's sort of like, what is that sus thing? What is that? Among Us, right?
Among Us, yeah.
There's a school classroom experiment like Among Us, which is there's gonna be in this classroom, some of you are gonna be witches, some of you aren't, but the goal is to collect yourself into a group that does not have a witch in it. And everybody who's got a group with no witch passes, and everybody who's got a witch in their group fails. And then the teacher goes around and whispers into everybody's ear. So we're gonna, they're gonna know if they're a witch or not a witch, but nobody else gets to know. And so then the class starts splitting up into groups, and they're like, okay, it's a big group over here. No, it splinters off over there. You end up with all these different little groups, and then a couple of kids that look like witches who are in the corner by themselves, right? And then, okay, all right. The end experiment teacher says, okay, now we're going to reveal everybody who's a witch, raise your hand. And nobody raises their hand.
Right.
There were no witches, but because people thought there were, they've all separated out into these groups. And that's I don't know why I went down that analogy, but that is
But it's the way that people are influenced by other people around them, and the way that people look at information isn't necessarily on its own merits, but because of that influence. Yeah, since probably first, second grade at my son's elementary school, they've been teaching internet literacy, media literacy, and every year they kind of up the ante with how they teach and what they do. But I mean, I'm excited that it's part of the curriculum because it's so essential.
Well, and that's kind of what I was, not to throw Meta under the bus again, but also to throw them under the bus again. They know how to basically get us addicted to repetitive ideas, right? So they have figured out how to engineer everyone's own echo chamber and promote things that are easy and make us feel good and confirm what we already think we know. And so it's a strange situation where it gets harder and harder to identify what a legitimate source is, and also when to question things and when not to. Because you only see the things that you think are truth, pretty much. And the things that you don't are so few and far between that it kind of just becomes noise and you scroll right past it. So it's I definitely think there is a manipulation of our brain chemistry going on to suppress critical thinking when we are on these platforms.
Yeah.
But and it's unfortunate.
Pull the lever. Pull the lever. Pull the lever.
What lever are we pulling?
It's the social media slot machine.
Yeah.
The treat lever. Like whatever,
the dopamine lever.
Yeah. feels so
Uh,
good.
uh, uh, uh.
Speaking of treats,
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to some good dreams
Mm,
as
mhm.
I sleep tonight
Oh,
Oh,
that's right.
and
can
It's
I
rest
nighttime.
myself.
It's
Can I-
nighttime where you
can I
guys
show
are.
you guys one thing actually before we go that I meant to talk about in the after show and I totally forgot?
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
So there was a story this week that I didn't report on because it's
Is it the
it's
panda story?
no.
No, okay.
No, that was just like they figured out a way to make themselves fat off of bamboo. Okay.
All right.
But this one I didn't bring because it was just like a hey, there's this cool thing. Did you know it exists? Which is always a fun story, but it's not really as fun to talk about as other things. But it's very loud music in my ears. But this is a blanket
I can't.
octopus.
Oh, that's an octopus. Okay.
So blanket
That's
octopus.
cool. It's like it's got little streamers.
Yeah. So the blanket octopus is a thing. And I just kind of wanted to alert all of you to that. So I encourage you all to read a Wikipedia article about blanket octopus because they're crazy. The females are about 2 meters long and the males are about 2 centimeters long.
Whoa.
When they're young, they're actually immune to the Portuguese man o' war nematocysts, and they can break off tentacles from the man o' war and wield them like little nunchucks to protect themselves.
Wow.
They have these blanket-like appendages. Scientists think maybe that they can actually sloth them off to kind of give a predator something to chase so that they can scuttle away. They're crazy. They're crazy, crazy, crazy animals that we know very little about. Also
the ability to break parts of yourself off and offer them as snacks to a predator so you can make your escape is
like
brilliant.
lizard tails.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, just like lizard tails. But this is the other crazy thing. So with other octopuses, the males use their hectocotylus, their sperm packet bearing arm, and they kind of just tuck it up under the mantle of the female and hand her the sperm packet and then retract their arm. These guys, because they're so tiny and it's so kind of hard to get where they're trying to go, the males fully detach their hectocotylus and like shove the whole arm up into the female's mantle. And so then she just ends up collecting a bunch of these and then she picks whichever sperm she wants. So there's that.
That's awesome.
They also make
I want that one. I'll take that
no.
one.
There you go. The females make a I think it's calcium carbonate kind of little cocoon for their eggs so they can carry them with them since they're not quite planktonic, but they're open sea. They don't stop really. So kind of nomadic out in the ocean. So they do that and they carry the eggs in a quote unquote sausage
Oh, here
shaped
comes the yawns. Hey, that's
calcareous
the end.
secretion.
Yeah, you're yawning. Say goodnight, Blair.
She's a
I'm
yonk
talking about the
octopus.
blanket
You're
octopus.
yawning through a story.
Because
I
she's
can't-
thinking about her blanket.
my blanket octopus. So anyway, before I say goodnight, everyone,
Whew.
go look up the Wikipedia for the blanket octopus. It's not a long Wikipedia article because they've only ever been seen like 3 times. So
It has
check
to be
out
more than 3. I can see lots of pictures on the internet.
yeah, not many though, and not enough for them to figure out like, are they
Yeah.
terminal breeders? Like many
Many
octopuses
unknown
are.
details.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they breed and
So
die. Breed and die.
lots of questions about the blanket octopus because they're not often described. All right.
They didn't discover a single male blanket octopus until 2002
Yeah.
because
They're
they
like,
were
what's
looking
this
at.
little guy?
Yeah. What?
Oh my
That's
God.
wild.
I love them.
That's
They're
cool.
great. I just love when I discover a new animal and I'm like, what? 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 It's like,
This might
it's-
call for a TWIS security blanket octopus.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Somebody knit me a TWIS security blanket octopus. You just knit a blanket and then put a little
All right, I'll be
The
right-
little octopus at the
octopus
end of
body
it.
at
I
the end.
know.
Oh,
Yep.
Justin was about to say goodnight.
What
Oh,
just happened?
man.
His
I was
camera's still
really
on. He
gonna
can't
do
just
it.
do that. What just happened?
You said he'd be right back, and I said, no, wait.
Why does he do that?
I know, I want to. It's okay. All right.
There he
Almost
is.
ready.
Okay. Say good morning, Justin.
Hang on.
Hang on. Oh, yep. Oh,
Very good.
That's what you were getting.
No, I had to make it. Whew, that was
Oh.
fascinating.
Did you just knit that for Blair?
Just
Yeah.
did it for Blaze. Yes,
Send it
I
over.
delivered.
Right there.
Yeah.
My address
Say
only has
goodnight,
4
Blair.
umlauts and 1 funny looking O. Good night, Blair. Say good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Justin.
Good
night, Kiki.
Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for another great episode of TWIS. Thanks for being here. And we will see you all again next week. Yes. Maybe there will be octopuses. There's one right there. Have a good night, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe. Try to stay as sane as possible. Thank you so much.